I waited in a courtroom, staring at the two individuals who had to love and take care of me. My parents. 20 years after they left me at a train platform with $100 bill and a casual good luck, they were back. But they weren't here for a reunion. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to sue me. For 20 years of absolute silence, they said I owed them. They claimed the daughter they had cast aside was now their path to an easy retirement and wealth. They threatened to destroy my career and my reputation if I didn't comply. They thought I was still that scared 16-year-old girl they had left on a cold, hard bench. They were on the verge of discovering how mistaken they were. It arrived on a Tuesday. I recall the small, mundane details with a precision that seems like a slap in the face today. The sky was a dull, unremarkable blue. The coffee in my beloved mug was warming. I was sitting at my home office desk, a room I'd specially designed, filled with books and light. It was my haven, a sanctuary I had created myself, brick by sorrowful brick. I was reviewing grant requests for the youth foundation I started. This foundation helps children who, like me, have slipped through the system. Then the doorbell went off, a harsh, jarring ring that pierced the stillness. It was a process server, a man with a worn face and a large manila envelope. He asked me if I was me. I nodded, and he handed me the papers. My name stood out at the top in bold black letters next to the plaintiffs, Richard and Alina Vaughn, my mom and dad. For a moment, the entire world spun. It was like I saw ghosts. I hadn't heard their names spoken in 20 years. I hadn't allowed them to survive anywhere but in the farthest, most sealed-off recesses of my mind. And now, here they were, tearing back into my life on a piece of legal paper. I was shaking as I tore open the envelope. The legalese was a thick underbrush, but the gist of it was coldly straightforward. They were suing me. They were using one of those rare, filial responsibility laws that some states have. They claimed they were broke and couldn't take care of themselves. They said, as their successful, high-income daughter, I had a moral and legal duty to support them. They were asking for an outrageous sum of money, a figure intended not only to take care of them, but to disable me. It was a figure that could drain my foundation dry and break apart the life I had built. They had even included documents outlining my projected net worth, my foundation's income, and the value of my home. They'd been observing me. Shivers coursed down my spine unrelated to the air conditioning. This wasn't a last-ditch effort from two elderly folks in tough times. It was a planned, predatory strike. I sank into my chair, the papers sliding from my lap. The smell of my cold coffee suddenly seemed bitter and acrid. The light in my beautiful office felt like it was mocking me. For 20 years, I'd been running from their memory. I built a wall around my heart. It's made of success, independence, and a new family of friends and coworkers. I believed if I just kept going, if I never, ever looked back, I could outrun the past. But the past hadn't just caught up. It had served me with a lawsuit. My mind, against my will, flashed back. Not to the train station, but years earlier. I was 10. I'd just taken first in the school's spelling bee. I dashed home holding a small plastic trophy, my heart racing in my chest. I flung open the door and yelled, "I won, I won!" My dad was sitting at the table reading the paper. He didn't even glance up. He just grumbled, "Don't get a big head. Pride goes before a fall." My mother was in the kitchen. She looked over, her expression a bland mask of weary indifference. "That's nice, dear," she murmured, her voice flat. "Be careful not to scratch the floor." The trophy now seemed heavy and dumb. I took it quietly to my room and jammed it into the back of my closet. That was the central lesson of my childhood. Your success is a bother, your happiness is an irritation, and your needs are an inconvenience. I was an afterthought in my own house. I simply never thought they'd someday make it official by abandoning me at a train station. I was 16. The day it occurred was gray and wet, the type of August day that seems more like November. They informed me we were taking a trip, a weekend in the city. It was strange. We never took trips. My entire childhood consisted of orchestrated disappointments. Christmases without gifts and birthdays without cake. They used to say, "Life is full of disappointment. You need to learn that now." So, a surprise vacation. A lump of fear formed in my stomach, but I packed a little suitcase, just like they instructed. The 2-hour ride into the city was almost in silence. My father's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My mother stared out of her window at the gray sky. I attempted to talk once, pointing out a hawk. My father grunted. My mother didn't say anything. The silence in that car was a heavy, choking presence. We did not go to a hotel. We headed straight to the big central train station. It was a large, echoing space filled with busy feet and the sad sound of train whistles. My father stopped. "All right, out," he instructed. I trailed after them onto the platform, carrying my little bag across my shoulder. The air tasted of diesel and hot metal. My father spun around to regard me. His eyes were fixed on mine with an expression I had never seen before, neither anger nor sadness, but a cold detachment, as if a scientist studying a bug. "We've done all we can to teach you," he said, his voice strange and level. "We've taught you that the world is tough and you can't count on anyone. Now we give you the final test." He dug into his pocket and took out a crumpled, worn $100 bill, shoving it into my palm. My mother stood just behind his left shoulder, arms folded, looking at a point over my right shoulder. She wouldn't even glance at me. "You're 16, my father continued. "Old enough to make it, you're smart, you'll get through this. This is for the best. It'll toughen you up." The world contracted to his face, to the thin bill in my sweaty palm. I couldn't talk, a humming in my ears. What are you saying?" I finally stuttered. "The trip." "There is no trip," my mother barked, cutting through the din. She was talking to me for the first time. Her voice was harsh, impatient, like I was being obtuse on purpose. "This is it. This is the lesson. Your life begins now. Don't even think about finding us. Don't call. We're leaving you behind. This is your opportunity to show you have learned something." Then they turned, both of them, like they had rehearsed it, and they walked off. They didn't even look back. I simply stood there, stock still, watching their backs get farther and farther away until they disappeared into the crowd. I waited for them to turn and yell, to holler that it was a bad joke, a joke. But they never did. I was left alone. In a new city, $100, a tote with a couple of changes of clothes, and those words ringing in my ears. "It will make you strong." I fell onto a rough wooden bench, the $100 bill clenched in my hand. The shock began to work its way into a wave of fear so intense that it was immobilizing. Each person who passed by seemed menacing. I was a kid, and my parents had just erased me. Not in anger, but quietly, systematically, and with ominous intent. They'd left me as a lesson. I sat on that bench for hours, as day gave way to night, the cold concrete seeping into my body. The fear never fully went away, but another thought began to form, a strong, sharp idea. I would not crack. I would not allow their lesson to consume me. I would persevere out of pure, raw spite. And I would never, ever permit them to see me again. That first night was the worst. The train station began to clear out, and the individuals who were remaining started staring at me with pity and suspicion. A security guard eventually approached me and informed me I couldn't sleep there. His tone wasn't cruel, just exhausted, but his words pushed me into a reality I wasn't prepared for. I was homeless. I walked for hours, hugging my bag to my body, the lights of the city indistinguishable. I was afraid of it all, dark alleyways, sounds behind me, the stares of strangers. That $100 was both a lifeline and a bullseye. I eventually stumbled upon a 24-hour diner and had a cup of tea, nursing it for 3 hours just so I could be in a warm, safe place. I observed the city's night crawlers, the lost, the lonely, and I knew I was among them now. That $100 had to make do. I survived on hot dogs and stale bread. I slept in bus stations until I was evicted, then in parks, behind bushes, my heart racing at each leaf stir. I became an expert at being invisible. Eyes down, no looking. I discovered that kindness was precious and not common. A kindly old woman once handed me her half-eaten sandwich wordlessly. I sobbed while eating it, not only because I was starving, but also because of the jolt of a simple human act. It was a week, and I knew I needed to do something. I was 16, no ID except for a school card, no address, no one. I spent my days in the public library. It was warm, it was free, and it was my only connection to a world that made sense. I read as much as I could about assistance for homeless youth and learned about shelters and drop-in centers. My first attempt was a disaster. I had gone to a youth shelter, my heart racing with hope. The woman behind the desk eyed my school ID and requested my parents' contact numbers. "We have to call them," she said. I attempted to explain, fumbling. "They abandoned me. It was a lesson." She gave me the look I'd grown familiar with, suspicion blended with disbelief. She believed I was another runaway, a liar. "We can't take you in unless we speak to your guardians," she told me. The door to that possibility came crashing shut. My parents had been cunning. They'd never beaten me, so that marks were left on me. They'd set things up in such a way, so out of the usual script of brutality, that it was difficult to accept. So I was alone. I wanted a job, any job. I shopped at a thrift store and acquired some clothes to make me appear older. I just strolled into a diner and explained to the owner that I was 18, had just arrived in the city, and my wallet had been stolen. I fabricated a sad but plausible tale. The owner, a rough-looking man named Sal with an otherwise softer heart, gave me a chance. He hired me to do the dishes, cash in hand, under the table. It was hard work. My hands were perpetually chapped and raw. I'd return to the small, windowless room I had in a boarding house, smelling of grease and soap. But it was mine. It had a lock. For the first time in weeks, I could sleep with one eye open. Sal became my first anchor. He never asked too many questions. He'd leave a plate of food for me at the end of my shift, pretending he demade too much. He was the one who helped me figure out how to get a state ID and how to navigate the nightmare of bureaucracy to become legally emancipated. It was a long, frustrating process. I dealt with paperwork and court appearances. I had to share my unbelievable story with judges who were often skeptical. But with Sal's silent encouragement, I did it. The day I had my official ID, the day I was lawfully my own individual, I got a surge of triumph so strong it was swaying. I had turned their cruel lesson on its head and used it as my declaration of independence. I finished high school by taking night classes. I did my homework in my small room after 10-hour shifts. I graduated cum laude. No one was present to witness me receiving my diploma, but I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for myself. I was creating a person, little by little, hard piece by hard piece. That girl from the train station was disappearing, and a new person was being hammered out in that crucible. A stronger person. A person who was gradually discovering she didn't require them. She merely needed herself. If you liked this account or faced a tough past, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these stories of resilience. It also reassures me that our past doesn't have to define our future. Your support is everything. Now, let's continue with what went down when they returned. The years following high school were a haze of work and school. I received a full scholarship to the state university, courtesy of my grades and the essay I penned about my life. I've always wondered if Sal shared my essay with one of his patrons, a retired professor who may have pulled some strings. When questioned, Sal merely grunted and said, "You earned it, kid." I majored in business and psychology. I wanted to understand the systems that fail people and the trauma that comes from it. I had 3 jobs in college. I cleaned offices at dawn, worked in the library between classes, and waited tables on weekends. I lived on caffeine and sheer will. But every good grade, every dollar I saved, was another brick in the fortress I was building against the memory of that train station. I graduated and worked at a small nonprofit with at-risk kids. A revelation. I recognized my own story in these kids who had been abandoned, abused, or simply forgotten. But I also recognized their remarkable resilience. I found my purpose there. It wasn't enough to rescue just myself. I needed to create a safety net to catch others. And I was doing it well. I knew the tangible needs and the emotional wounds. I drafted grants that got funded because they were written with the passion of someone who had walked through the fire themselves. 5 years went by, and I was in charge. 10 years went by, and I quit to begin my foundation. I constructed it from the ground up with a small inheritance Sal had left me upon his death, and a business loan I struggled like crazy to secure. My foundation didn't just provide housing. We also offered education, therapy, and life skills to teens who had aged out of the foster care system or been emancipated. It became my purpose in life. Within the decade, the foundation expanded into a nationally prominent organization. I was interviewed by the papers and featured on the local news. I was the miracle story, the girl from nowhere who created an empire of hope. In my interviews, I always kept my past nebulous. I'd say I had a tough childhood and stop there. The whole story was a hidden monster I locked inside. It was too ugly, too unbelievable. And on some level, I was still ashamed. And then, 20 years after they'd walked out, they saw me. A speech I made was broadcast. Someone from our old life who was friends with theirs saw it and rang them up. Just like that, the specters were upon us. There was a letter first to my office, forwarded from the TV station. I knew my mother's handwriting. My heart thumped while I opened it. The letter was appallingly maudlin. They claimed they had always missed me, always questioned about me, and how proud they were. It was an outright rewrite of history. Their lesson had been a hurtful act of tough love, they said, and now they said our family could be whole again. They wanted to meet. I read it and had ice in my veins. This was not an apology. It was a negotiation. They were feeling the waters. I threw the letter in the trash. I did the same with the second one and the third. Then came the emails and the calls to my office. My assistant, Maria, a woman as loyal as she is fierce, became my gatekeeper. Their attitude shifted. The sugar soured into something sour and entitled. They labeled me as ungrateful and heartless. They told me I owed them. They told me they had given me the gift of my strength, so my achievement was theirs to claim. It was the reasoning of a parasite. The last straw was when they appeared at a fundraising gala for my foundation. I was speaking when I caught sight of them at the rear of the ballroom. They were older, naturally. My father was bent over, his face a network of angry creases. My mother was smaller, with a brittle, grasping quality to her eyes. They exuded a sort of shabby entitlement. Having them there, in my domain, a place I had constructed to be safe from them, was a violation. I delivered my speech on automatic pilot, and they cornered me by the exit. "We have to talk," my father told me, his tone low and raspy. "We have nothing to say to each other," I replied, my voice colder than I knew it was capable of being. "You owe us," my mother spat, a forced smile not touching her eyes. "We're your parents, we're old, we're ill, we have nothing, you have everything, you will take care of us." "Take care of you?" I nearly laughed. The nerve was amazing. "You forfeited the right to refer to yourselves as my parents 20 years ago on a train station platform. You got the wrong person. Now, if you don't mind, you're trespassing." I turned and left, Maria walking alongside me like a bodyguard. The only thing I saw was their faces, contorted with anger. I figured that would be the last of that. I was an idiot. 2 weeks later, the process server was on my doorstep. They couldn't get my money through phony love, so now they were going to take it by force. The suit was a call to war, and I was prepared to take it on. I retained the most skilled attorney I could locate, a tough, no-nonsense female by the name of Evelyn Reed. I explained it all, beginning at the train depot. I didn't cry. The tale was so old it sounded flat and hard. Evelyn sat silently, her face inscrutable. When I finished speaking, she sat in silence for a moment. Then she told me, "The filial responsibility statute in this state does exist, but it's hardly ever enforced, particularly in a case like yours. They have a case on paper, but that's all. An indigent parent can sue a child for support." She leaned in. "But the law does provide exceptions in cases of abandonment, abuse, or neglect. They're asserting you have a duty." They dropped that responsibility, along with all other parental duties, 20 years ago. The legal process was a grinding, slow hell. Their lawyer, a slick man with oiled hair, gave me a list of awkward questions. They were designed to make me feel embarrassed. They wanted to portray me as a cold, ungrateful rich woman, stone-heartedly refusing to assist her poor, aged parents. The deposition was the absolute worst. I spent 8 hours in a conference room. Their attorney interrogated me while my parents sat across from me, looking miserable. He mentioned my foundation. "So, you have made a whole career out of aiding troubled children, Ms. Vaughn?" he asked, his voice heavy with insincerity. "Yes." "You think needy children should be cared for?" "I do." "Then why," he said, leaning in, "do you refuse to care for the 2 people who gave you life? The people who, by your own account, taught you the very strength you now profit from. Isn't that the height of hypocrisy?" The charge hung in the air. I glanced beyond him at my parents, at the individuals attempting to destroy my life's work to enjoy their retirement. The rage that had been building inside me for an eternity finally reached its boiling point. "Let me be clear," I stated, my tone low and trembling with anger. "I assist children who have been failed by the adults in their lives. I assist them because I understand what it's like to be discarded. The resilience I own was not a gift from them. It was a wound. I established my life despite what they did, not due to it. What they're doing today is not asking for care. It's an extension of the same selfish brutality they've consistently exhibited. They aren't parents. They're creditors. And the debt they believe I owe was paid in full on a cold bench in a train station 20 years ago. Dead silence. Their attorney looked embarrassed. Evelyn nodded a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. My parents stared, their faces of grief gone, replaced with pure venom. But we needed something more than my testimony. We needed to destroy their lies. Evelyn hired a private investigator, a retired cop named Frank, to research my parents' lives for the past 2 decades. The lesson tale seemed too weak. There had to be something else. Frank was excellent. He went back and uncovered old court files from my parents' hometown and discovered it. The key. My maternal grandmother, whom I hardly knew, died 3 months before they left me behind. She was a taciturn, thrifty woman and did not trust my father. And she had left something behind. A large something. Not a fortune, but a sizable amount of money that would alter a life. And she had left it all to me, to be kept in trust by my parents until I was 21. They concealed it. They spent the money, and 3 months later, disposed of the only one who could assert their right to it. They didn't leave me alone to learn my lesson. They left me behind to conceal a crime. They stole my inheritance and discarded me like a piece of evidence. The evening Evelyn revealed it to me, I hadn't felt anger or triumph, only a deep, echoing emptiness. All these years, I had secretly thought that perhaps, in some misguided way, they believed they were acting in my best interests. But this was just basic, simple greed. It was a theft, followed by a human garbage disposal. It was so much nastier and sadder than I had ever imagined. This wasn't about getting myself into trouble anymore. It was about getting them. The trial day was like a dream. I entered the same courthouse where I had battled to be proclaimed an emancipated minor all those years before. My parents and their attorney were already seated, confident as if they were going to collect a check. They had no clue what was in store. Their attorney cast them as loving, desperate parents devastated by their hard-hearted daughter. They testified and cried crocodile tears over their affection for me, their pride, and their deteriorating health. I could sense the jury's sympathy tipping their way. Then we got to go. Evelyn recalled my father to the stand. She began softly, asking him about the lesson. "Mr. Vaughn," she began, "did you really think it was best to let your 16-year-old daughter face the city alone with $100 to toughen her up?" "It was the most difficult thing we ever did," he replied, wiping away a tear. "But we knew she'd succeed." "And you were concerned about her?" Evelyn inquired. "Every day, we prayed for her." Evelyn's voice turned cold. "Who was the family friend you trusted that you left her with, Mr. Vaughn? What's their name?" He stuttered. He couldn't come up with a name because they never existed. The first crack in his alibi. Then Evelyn dove into finances. "You say you are impoverished, right?" "Entirely," he replied. "Is that because you've had difficulty handling finances?" she inquired. The other attorney protested, but the judge permitted it. Evelyn proceeded to the witness stand and put a paper in front of my father. "Mr. Vaughn, this is Defense Exhibit A, a certified copy of your mother-in-law's will. Would you read paragraph 3 to the court?" My father's complexion turned white. He looked at it, his jaw opening and closing, but no words emerged. "Let me," Evelyn stated graciously. Her words echoed across the still courtroom. "I leave my entire estate of $250,000 to my dear granddaughter," she said, looking straight at me. "It will be held in trust by her parents, Richard and Alina Vaughn. This money is for her education, support, and welfare, and she will receive it on her 21st birthday." She allowed the words to hover in the air. "Your mother-in-law died on 10th May, 2 decades ago, right?" He nodded numbly. "And you got the complete inheritance, as trustees, on 1st June of that year." He nodded again. "And then, on 28th August, fewer than 3 months later, you took your daughter, the only beneficiary of that trust, to a train station and left her there. Is that correct, too? A collective gasp filled the air. The jurors looked on, their countenances a combination of shock and gradual realization. You stole your daughter's inheritance, Mr. Vaughn, Evelyn stated, her voice steely. You blew through her money, and then you discarded her. And 20 years later, after you've blown it all, you have the temerity to stand in this court and tell us that she owes you something. Is there something else you'd like to lie about on the stand today? My father glared at her, his face a gray mask of terror. He glared at the jury, the judge, and then at me. In his eyes, I saw it all. Not regret, not remorse, only the raw, pathetic fear of getting caught. He remained silent. It was finished. The judge threw out their case with prejudice, so they would never be able to bring it again. He said he would send proof of possible inheritance, fraud, and perjury to the district attorney's office. This is for a criminal investigation. The lesson finally ended. Thank you for watching this tale to its conclusion. It's not a straightforward one to tell, but it's a significant one. If you have such a tale of overcoming family treachery or discovering your strength, I would be grateful if you left it in the comments below. Let's build a community here where we can encourage one another. Don't forget to subscribe for further tales of survival and justice. Conclusion. I left the courtroom and entered the sunny afternoon. It was brighter than it had been in months. My attorney, Evelyn, accompanied me. They won't bother you again, she assured me. I knew she was telling the truth. A part of me had anticipated feeling this enormous sense of triumph, but I didn't. I just felt still. The anger that had fueled me for months had exhausted itself, leaving a clean, still peace. The demons were gone, not exorcised, but they had lost their sway. They were no longer the monstrous demons from my past, but just two little, pathetic, selfish people who had made a series of poor decisions. They had rendered themselves insignificant. My family, which I had chosen, was outside waiting for me, Maria, my friends, and the board members from my foundation. They had sat in the back of the courtroom throughout the trial. They spoke little. They just hugged me, one at a time. And with their arms, I felt the true definition of family. It's not blood or duty. It's the people who show up. The individuals who have got your back when the world is crumbling. The individuals who adore you not despite your scars, but because they are a testament to the strength it took to get them. That evening, I did not go home. I went to one of the youth shelters my foundation operates. I hung out with the kids, played video games, and simply listened. I saw the same fear in their eyes that I once saw in my own, but I also saw the same flicker of hope, that obstinate refusal to be broken. I looked at them, and I realized the greatest truth. My parents' worst sin wasn't taking my money. It was attempting to take my future. They attempted to show me I was nothing, that I was isolated, and that the world was a cruel, unyielding place. And in a sense, they were correct. The world can be all those things, but they didn't teach me the most valuable lesson, the one I had to discover on my own. You can create your world. You can create your own family. You can take the ugliness and the pain and shape it into something that serves someone else. They didn't make me strong. They just uncovered a strength that had always been there inside me. My life is my own. My success is my own. My family is my own. And that is a triumph that no lawsuit could ever infringe upon and no amount of money could ever buy.